All right, everybody. So this is the video lecture from yesterday. I kind of made that little boo-boo on the guided notes. In today's class, you should have the new copy. So I'm not gonna really, I'm not gonna repeat a lot of. I'm gonna go back through the lecture from yesterday, and you can kind of fill in finally the correct guided notes. Again, you should be working on this after you complete your NATO versus Warsaw Belwork assignment. This will be on your exit ticket, which will be for homework for you guys. So anyway, without further ado, Cold War. What is the Cold War? It should be filling this in your guided notes. Let me grab it really quick so I can make sure you can follow along with you. On top of your guided notes, what is the Cold War? Conflict between nations that does not involve direct military action. So again, during the Cold War, the U.S. and the Soviet Union never fought against each other. It was never a squared off, full out scale war. Now we were close several times, but ultimately it was avoided. And we'll talk about why next week. Again, this war was more over political, economic, ideological ways of thinking about things. So, like again, we believe that democracy and capitalism was the best way. They believed that communism was the best way, and both sides were trying to spread their ideas. This was a war over ideas and competition, too. So you see this graphic down here of the 1980 Olympic hockey match from the U.S. and the Soviet Union. Who can get to space first? Who can land on the moon first? Who can walk on the moon? Technology, science, all those things were competitions. Again, you have these big two superpowers who were competing in everything to try and make it look like they were above the other one. They compete. So again, a competition in everything. That was really what the Cold War was. And the reason why they called it the Cold War was, again, the war was cold. There was no direct military action between the two. Now, there was the Vietnam War, there was the Korean War, but that wasn't directly a direct face-off between the two. Those were involved other nations. All right, so time frame. 1945 to finally the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. So that's number 2 under guided notes. When was the Cold War? Again, you don't need to copy this word for word. Just jot down 1945 to 1991. That's simple. Simple as that. When communism is going to collapse. Now some goals. Goals of the Cold War. So Soviets, you see, Soviets, and what you should copy down is the Eastern Bloc nations. And we'll talk about that a little bit today and tomorrow in terms of what that is. But we already discussed this yesterday. It was those countries that bordered the Soviet Union. So Poland, Romania. Those are the nations that they wanted to control. Those are the Eastern Bloc nations. Their goal, fill in, spread worldwide communism. And then obviously the U.S. This was the Western democracies, U.S. and the Western democracies. This was in Europe, so Great Britain, France, Ireland, all those Western European nations were aligned with us as democracies. And our goal, vice versa, was going to be to the idea of containment. Think about yesterday. My example was me against Cody. I'm playing basketball against him. You know I'm going to score 35. Your job is to contain me. Don't let me get 60. Same thing for like LeBron. You know LeBron's going to get his 30, 35 points a game. You don't want him going off for 60 or 50 points. So, again, that's the goal. So our job, our idea is going to be contain communism. Don't let it spread to new areas. It's fine where it's at now, but don't let it spread to new countries. This is why we're going to fight in Vietnam. This is why we're going to fight in Korea. And then finally, methodologies. I talked about this yesterday. Espionage. So both sides. They have the KGB. We're going to have the CIA. So we're going to be going and do spying missions. I think I told you guys yesterday about the show called The Americans on FX. Highly recommend it in terms of really understanding how intricate these spy networks were. The arms race. Both sides will now have nuclear weapons. We use it in World War II with the atom bomb. Well, the Soviets, they will start developing their own. Then we'll start building hydrogen bombs and nuclear missiles, and then again stockpiling those things. Again, an ideological competition. So the goal is to win the minds and the hearts of the third world countries. So to make us look like the good guys around the world. So both sides were trying to have that image. And then finally, what you guys did in your Belwork assignment with NATO and Warsaw, Europe was very bipolar. You had one side was democracy, one side communism. And it was very easy to tell where that split was, as we'll get to, as you guys kind of saw in your opening activity. All right, now roots. This is again in your guided notes. Roots of the Cold War. Again, I saw it yesterday. Bolshevik Revolution. This stems back to World War One, when the Bolsheviks overthrew Tsar Nicholas II, overthrew the monarchy in Russia, um, and the West, which is us, we didn't recognize the Bolsheviks as a legitimate government. Remember, the Bolsheviks dropped the Russians out of World War One. They removed themselves, and we didn't recognize them. In fact, after World War One, the Red Army and the White Army. Red Army was the Bolsheviks. White Army was those who were loyal to the Tsar. Um, will begin a civil war in Russia, and we're going to help. We're going to fund and help out the White Army. And this is something that Stalin will never forget, along with a lot of the other, founding fathers of the Communist Party, the Bolsheviks within Russia. So this is kind of where us and the Soviet Union really start to, butt heads. And as we talked yesterday, World War II is again another prime example. Starting off in the very beginning of World War II, Stalin and Hitler had that agreement where they agreed to basically make an alliance. This did not go over very well with the United States or Great Britain. So this is something that with the Soviet Union can never really fully trust Stalin. So yeah, the second thing was D-Day. Stalin was always really angry about the United States and Great Britain. It took him 3 years to finally invade France to reclaim it. Now, the reason why was because Stalin wanted the United States and Britain to open up that second front on the Western Front. So all in the meantime, he's fighting against the Germans alone over on the east, and he's going through a lot of money, going through a lot of lost lives, a lot of death, a lot of casualties, a lot of destruction. Um, and he's basically begging and pleading the Americans and the British to open up that second front, force the Germans to carry out missions over there. So this is something that was always something that was very contentious between him and Churchill and FDR. And then finally, when World War II was coming to an end, the Yalta Conference also showcased a lot of the Cold War tensions, like the roots. They both had very different visions for how Europe was going to look. Again, it all goes back to the goals that I said earlier. Our goal was to spread democracy. Their goal is going to be to spread communism. And at Yalta, they promised to have free elections in Poland. Now, as we talked about, as you guys read about the other day, Stalin is not going to give free elections in Poland. He's basically going to force all those Eastern Bloc nations under communist rule. And so something, again, it was always very contentious between the United States and the Soviet Union, because that's what Stalin did. He forced these countries to become communist, become puppet nations of his. So at this point, you should have, through C, Yalta should be filled out. And then finally, last two, the Soviets. So what I have in pink is what you should have filled in your guided notes. The Soviets claim. So again, I showed you guys this yesterday. This map. So going back to World War II, when the Russians were fighting against the Germans on the Eastern Front, especially towards the end, they freed a lot of these people. Poland. They freed Poland from Hitler's rule. They freed them from Nazi rule. Romania, same thing. So Stalin, in a way, thought, well, geez, I helped liberate you. I helped save you from Nazi control. Therefore, I should control you. I should get something out of winning World War II. So he always kind of felt like he was kind of owed that. And again, he wanted to spread his communistic belief to those nations. Again, it was all a part of his Cold War goal. And obviously, vice versa. The U.S. wanted them to have free elections, and ultimately it didn't happen, as we talked about. And then finally, post-war Germany. This is again number 4E, post-war Germany. Look at slides 10 and 11. So this is this slide here. What happened to Germany and Berlin? So fill that in. If you want to jot this down in your notes, then jot it down, copy it down. Obviously, you don't make your own sketch, for as long as it makes sense to you. So again, big mistake. After World War I, the U.S., Britain, all these countries, we leave Germany. And look what that caused. That caused severe inflation. That caused a severe depression within Germany. That led to far left and far right groups within Germany forming because we left. We kind of let them be. And we said, hey, here's the Treaty of Versailles. We're going to hammer you with a bunch of these war debt and reparations. You got to pay back all this money. And we leave. That didn't work, as we know. Led to the rise of Hitler and, again, these extremist groups. Also due to the poor economy. So after World War II, again, history, you learn your lesson. we're going to stay in Germany. We're going to occupy Germany. We're going to help them rebuild so we don't make the same mistake twice. So you see Germany is split up into 4 sections. Here's the British zone, here's the French zone, and here's the American zone, and here's the Soviet zone. So here is the pink is something called East Germany. Here's the key, East Germany. The green part is West Germany. Now, although Britain, French, and the American, they have different zones, they all operated basically the same. They all were democratic in theory, democratic in principles. So they kind of operated basically the same way. So again, democracy on the west, east, communism. Also notice Berlin. Berlin is located in the eastern sector, but Berlin was also split the exact same way. West Berlin was American, British, and French. East Berlin is going to be Soviet controlled. As you guys see by this, by this picture down here at the bottom of the screen, this is a zoomed in version of Berlin. It's the exact same thing. So you have West Germany, West Berlin, U.S. controlled. East Germany, East Berlin will be communist. So you should kind of have that written in that section or draw a picture for yourself. All right. Finally, what we talked about yesterday, the big idea of containment. I already mentioned this earlier in the thing, but our goal is to promote democracy in Europe and Asia. Help poor third world countries, the poor countries of the world. Be the good guy. And the reason why you want to do this is because that you want to sell, again, going back to imperialism and industrialization, you want to build these relationships and these bonds because of trade. These people, if you control them, if you build good trades with them, they will buy U.S. products. So that will help out American business by us selling our products there. So the whole idea of containment. We don't want these countries turning communist because they will not buy U.S. products. That's why communism is one of the reasons why communism is feared. They won't trade with us. So again, containment. Communism is okay where it's at, but don't let it spread. All right, next slide. Now this Soviet goals should be on the back of the first page. Soviet goals, foreign policy. Create greater security for itself. As we already talked about, again, we already went to this yesterday, in terms of what the Soviet Union wants. So, again, if you need to pause this, copy this down, go ahead. But guys, right here, you see by this graphic here, this red line here, you see the split. This is the Iron Curtain. It's not a real curtain. It's not a real wall. It's an imaginary line, but you can see it. These are the Eastern Bloc nations that Soviet Union is going to control. These are going to be communist nations. Okay, and this red line will separate communist from democratic. Okay. Now, the Truman Doctrine. I told you guys yesterday, think of Turkey Truman. Truman, Turkey. Why? Because this was the pledge by President Truman that he's going to pledge any democratic nation that wants support against communist groups within their country, that we are going to help them. So we're going to give over $400 million in support to Turkey and Greece, and we're going to show the Soviet Union through action, through the Truman Doctrine, that we're going to send military, we're going to send aid, we're going to send money into these nations to stop them from turning communist. So that's how the Soviets learn, not through talk, you do it through action. And that's what the Truman Doctrine was. This was an example of containment. We're going to contain communism. The example would be Truman Doctrine. So think of Turkey Truman. Think of, that there was a communist uprising in Turkey. We're going to help squash it. And then finally, Marshall Plan. Think of Marshall money. Money Marshall. Jot that down in your notes. Money Marshall. Marshall money. Whatever. This is our economic program. Guys, this is important for you to understand this. The biggest threat to having a democracy was poverty. If European countries went into poverty, they might be more apt to lean towards communism. We didn't want that happening. So the best way to do that is let's give them lots of money. $17 billion we're going to give them to help rebuild after World War II. Help them build their cities. Help them build their roads. Help them build their infrastructure. What does that do? It creates jobs. If people are working, they can afford to eat. Think about what we talked about earlier, revolutions. Why is the root of why those happen? Why do all the revolutions happen? Because people are hungry. People are starving. They need jobs. So we want to avoid revolutions. We want to avoid those countries from turning communist. So we're going to offer $17 billion to these countries to help them rebuild. And we'll also offer it to communist nations too. It won't just be democratic countries. Now, do you think Stalin's going to let us support it? No, he won't let them take any of it. But there it is. All right, so anyway, this is what you guys need. So help you with your exit ticket. Thank you for listening.